And even worse, I would say if I'm the WNBA, if they're so fixated on all this stuff, why not make the games more accessible to the fans? Welcome back, everyone. Happy October to you all. This is Bando's Breakdowns. My name is Zain, Bando, episode 62, coming at you to begin the month. Thank you so much for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. Just wanted to say real quick, can't believe we've hit 60 plus episodes. Wouldn't be possible without any of you guys supporting the show, interacting with all the stuff on social media. We were a little lighter on clips this week. I apologize for that. A little bit of a busy end of the week getting down to Champaign to cover the Illinois-USC game this past Saturday, the big noon kickoff game. Barstool, the Barstool College Football Show was there, et cetera, et cetera. So just wanted to take a quick second to acknowledge that we were a little bit lighter on social media this week, but we will be better moving forward. And speaking of social media, before I continue on here, just wanted to remind you guys to please be sure to follow on social media at Panda's Breakdown. Would be very much appreciated. Again, please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the ETB network. You can do so at youtube.com/ETB network. And of course, you can listen to Banda's Breakdowns wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Acast, and so much more. Please be sure to stay tuned for a word from our partners later on in the show as well. And we can now get started. So going into Zain's overview, now that we have that out of the way, just wanted to go over what we're going to be discussing on episode 62 this afternoon. A bunch of stuff. We're going to be talking about the WNBA, which is something we don't really talk about on this show. It's been in the news, specifically the commissioner of the WNBA, Kathy Engelberg, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, has been in the news as of late with the way she has treated some of her star players. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Napheesa Collier's rant that's going viral and is shocking the internet, and her claiming that the WNBA is not a free speech league. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about college football. We'll talk about the NFL. I'll get into the Bears beating the Raiders. We'll talk about that. We'll preview UFC 320. We'll recap UFC Perth. We'll talk a little bit about Dana White's 60 Minutes interview and listen to a audio soundbite from that I thought was very interesting. So stay tuned for that and so much more. But let's not waste any more time here. Let's talk. So the dark cloud over the WNBA, as I was just alluding to, a lot of stuff going on right now in the midst of the WNBA playoffs, the WNBA finals, all that stuff. A lot of talk about just equity, fairness, feeling like they're being treated as professional athletes as they should. So we're going to take a listen to bits and pieces of Napheesa Collier's rant there. And it's a 4-minute rant, but we'll pause it in between to give our reactions to some of the things that she told the media within the last several days. So let's jump right in, not waste any more time, and let's get a glimpse of this Napheesa Collier rant, which I thought was very interesting. And again, this is courtesy of her exit interview, so it should be an interesting listen. So let's hear it, and let's hear what she had to say.
So first of all, I'd like to congratulate the Mercury for advancing to the finals. And I want to be clear, this conversation is not about winning or losing. It's about something much bigger. The real threat to our league isn't money, it isn't ratings, or even missed calls, or even physical play. It's the lack of accountability from the league office. Since I've been in the league, you've heard the constant concerns about officiating, and it has now reached levels of inconsistency that plague our sport and undermine the integrity in which it operates. Whether the league cares about the health of the players is one thing, but to also not care about the product we put on the floor is truly self-sabotage. Year after year, the only thing that remains consistent is the lack of accountability from our leaders. The league has a buzzword that they've rolled out as talking points for the CBA as to why they can't pay the players what we're worth. That word is sustainability. But what's truly unsustainable is keeping a good product on the floor while allowing officials to lose control of games. Fans see it every.
And that part right there is particularly shocking because if you look at what NBA players make as opposed to the WNBA, it's a night and day difference, and it's a huge concern, especially considering how much the NBA does its best to support the WNBA. It's on the same networks essentially too. Like all this stuff correlates together in some form, and I think it's really disappointing that this is what it's come to. So let's continue.
Coaches, both winning and losing, pointed out every night in pregame and postgame media. Yet leadership just issues fines and looks the other way. They ignore the issues that everyone inside the game is begging to be fixed. That is negligence. At Unrivaled this past February, I sat across from Kathy and asked how she planned to address the officiating issues in our league. Her response was, well, only the losers complain about the refs. I also asked,
Well, I don't know about that. I think there's some pretty solid winners there. Caitlin Clark being one of them, that says how she feels about the referees. There are several other examples that I can't think of at the moment, but she's the one that comes across as one. And something I don't really talk about on this program is I cover the WNBA a little bit. I do some Dallas Wings coverage, and I know that Beckers and company, they weren't very good. They're undergoing a coaching change at the moment. Conclanes was let go in recent days by the organization. But still, it goes to show that these star players, I don't know if you would consider the names I just mentioned losers. Well, I mean, you could consider not her personally, but Becker's team a loser at the moment. I think all of these stars just want fair games. They just want games where, you turn on the TV or you go to the game in person and you feel like you didn't get juped at the end of the game. It's as simple as that. And they want to feel like they can be supported by fan bases to where they won't feel they're being turned on. It's as simple as that. And if the league promotes this kind of culture of aggressiveness, not being able to push back on how people feel, it's a major, major concern. So let's continue.
I also asked how she planned to fix the fact that players like Caitlin, Angel, and Paige, who are clearly driving massive revenue for the league, are making so little for their first 4 years. Her response was, Caitlin should be grateful she makes $16 million off the court, because without the platform that the WNBA gives her, she wouldn't make anything. And in that same conversation, she told me,
I don't know about that. I think Caitlin Clark outside of basketball is doing, I would hope at least, very well for herself, considering all the sponsorship deals that she has and stuff like that. So a lot of these players, there's just more to basketball. There's more to them than just basketball. But all their points are fair, given that this is the way that they make their living, and this is where they should be making the most money they can.
on their knees thanking their lucky stars for the media rights deal that I got them. That's a mentality driving our league from the top. We go to battle every day to protect a shield that doesn't value us. The league believes it succeeds despite its players, not because of them. I have the privilege of watching my husband run a league where he has to balance 100 different things at once. I won't pretend the job is easy, but even with all of that on his plate, he always takes the time to reach out to players when he sees an injury, whether it's unrivaled or even during the WNBA season. That is what leadership looks like.
Yeah, and if she would just step up or either not say anything and do the right thing behind closed doors, I don't think anybody would have issues.
It's the human element. It's basic integrity, and it's the bare minimum any leader should embody. This year alone, I've gotten calls, texts, and well wishes from so many players across the league. Those moments remind me that sometimes there are things bigger than the results than this game we play. But do you know who I haven't heard from? Kathy. Not one call, not one text. Instead, the only outreach has come from her number 2 telling my agent that she doesn't believe physical play is contributing to injuries. That is infuriating, and it's the perfect example of the tone-deaf, dismissive approach that our leaders always seem to take. I've finally grown tired. For too long, I have tried to have these conversations in private, but it's clear there is no intention of accepting there's a problem. The league has made it clear it isn't about innovation, it isn't about collaboration, it's about control and power. I've earned this platform and I've paid the price to get here, and now I have a responsibility to speak on behalf of the fans and everyone in this league that deserves better. Our leadership's answer to being held accountable is to suppress everyone's voices by handing out fines. I'm not concerned about a fine. I'm concerned about the future of our sport. At some point, everyone deserves to hear the truth from someone who I hope has earned the benefit of the doubt to fight for what is right and fair for our athletes and our fans. We have the best players in the world. We have the best fans in the world. But right now, we have the worst leadership in the world. If I didn't know exactly what the job entailed, maybe I wouldn't feel this way. But unfortunately for them, I do. We serve a league that has shown they think championship coaches and Hall of Fame players are dispensable, and that's fine. It's professional sports. But I will not stand quietly by and allow different standards to be applied at the league level. Thank you.
So, yeah, I mean, there's her rant. All of it was, to me, very, very well said. I think it's really disappointing that they're going through this. I really do. I hope things can get fixed. I think it's eerily similar to the current state of combat sports, unfortunately, which is something I have a pretty good understanding in. It's not as bad as the WNBA. There are fighters that make millions and millions of dollars for what they do, but very much many of those fighters don't. And a lot of them are afraid to speak out. It's a non-union league, referring to the UFC, and they're trying to grow their brand as well. And I think both leagues have a lot of similarities in terms of issues, but it's clear what the WNBA is doing is they're silencing their players from having a platform. And I think that's really disappointing. They should want to know what the constructive criticism is. They should want to know that the officials aren't being held accountable. They should want to know that they feel like these star players aren't making the money that they deserve. And even worse, I would say if I'm the WNBA, if they're so fixated on all this stuff, why not make the games more accessible to the fans? I mean, we've even talked about it on this network. We've talked about it on streams. We've talked about it on other things. The start times of some of these games are just ridiculous. And to me, I don't understand you know what the byproduct or the drawback is if they aren't willing to hold themselves accountable. I don't know who will, or I don't know what will, but I think it's a very, very disappointing thing. And I think it's something that they're going to have to monitor, and they're going to have to see, okay, now that she's made this rant, we shouldn't take any drastic measures. We should really hear what the players are saying, and we should try to hold ourselves accountable in the best way we possibly can. And that's kind of all I wanted to say on that front in regards to Collier. All right, let's move on now to some college football. Biggest week 5 takeaways. All right, I got the first big one for you. Penn State was exposed Saturday night. 110,000 people, whiteout game. Oregon, huge game, 6-3 in the country, and Penn State loses at home in James Franklin's biggest game, arguably, that he's ever coached at home. Inexcusable. Absolutely inexcusable. So that's my first big takeaway is Penn State right now, to me, way overrated. Can they run the table? That remains to be seen. It still has Ohio State left. Illinois, back on track. 34-32 win over USC. Last second field goal, David Alano delivers the goods. Huge win for Bielema. Huge win for Bielema. I underestimated that Bielema, after a loss, usually performs really well under pressure. That was a huge thing. We'll get into that in just a little bit. But overall, though, I thought a solid win for Illinois, good win for Luke Altmaier. Very disappointing look for USC, as it looked like it was going to have all this momentum going into the middle portion of the season, where it had a chance to either finish the season with a loss, that loss presumably being to Notre Dame, and now they'll be fighting to try to not finish anything lower than 10-2. Anything lower than 10-2, you're probably eliminated from playoff contention at that point. Virginia knocking off Florida State. That was a huge upset. What other games were there that I thought were great? Georgia, Alabama was a great game. Alabama won that. That was shocking. That was a huge win for And now they host Vanderbilt for College Game Day. That's exciting as well. Um, yeah, and then I guess a few more takeaways. UCLA might have a chance to go 0-12. They lost to it lost to Northwestern rather this past weekend, 17-14. Northwestern all of a sudden has found its footing underneath them, and they have a chance to get above 500 for the first time this weekend when they play Louisiana Monroe on homecoming. That'll be an interesting game as well. We won't really get into that, so I figured I'd mention it here. And then a couple other week 5 takeaways as well is you simply just don't know. Indiana, after scoring 63 points, could barely beat Iowa, just kind of as I predicted, that Iowa would more than likely not cover this, or Iowa would have a chance to cover the spread, and it did. Indiana was able to win the game, however. That was interesting. And then finally, the last takeaway I had is what in the world is going on with some of these games and some of these teams where it's simple. They just don't show up in the way that you think they're going to. I'm going to give you an example of one of those teams where I didn't think they were ready. Washington, huge home game against Ohio State, had that long home winning streak and laid a complete egg, 24-6. How does that even remotely happen? I don't know. But what I can tell you is Ohio State, best team in the country still, as we move into the second month, or I guess the second full month of the college football season. So, a huge win for Ohio State there to remain undefeated going into a nightcap game against Minnesota this week. Let's go over some of the best Week 6 games. Miami, Florida State, obviously a big one. Both teams are good. Illinois, Purdue, and the reason why I'm going to say it's one of my best Week 6 games is because people forget. No matter how bad Purdue is, no matter how bad Purdue is, and we'll get into this preview here shortly, but I just figured I would mention it here. No matter how bad Purdue is, Purdue always seems to find a way to play Illinois tough. Took Illinois to overtime a year ago, smashed them in West Lafayette in 2023. That was when Ryan Walters was still the coach. In 2022, when Jeff Brom was the coach, ended Illinois' Big Ten championship hopes, and obviously won the game in 21. Illinois hasn't won in West Lafayette since 2019. Can't get it done. I think it's a huge, huge trap game. Huge trap game before a big game against Ohio State next week. Of course, we'll get into it shortly, but it's a game that Illinois can't afford to lose. I find that to be a great game. Nebraska, Michigan State, I think is a chance to be a high-scoring game. I'm excited about that. Obviously, Vanderbilt, Alabama. That's a game that I think is extremely important. And of course, to kind of piggyback off, and I'll give you one more that I think has a chance to be really, really, really interesting, and that is Michigan versus Wisconsin. And it's for one reason and one reason only. Will Luke Fickell be able to save his job if it can somehow get an upset win this week? I don't think it'll happen. I think Wisconsin is in complete free fall mode, and I think Michigan needs a statement win on national TV. And I think Michigan gets it done at home in a big spot, in a game that it can't afford to lose before a very daunting October. That is some pretty big games on the horizon, some games that Michigan can't afford to lose, including a huge game against USC next week in Southern Cal, a nightcap game. That's going to be a game that I think a lot of people are interested in for Week 7. But I would say those are some of the best Week 6 games. So let's move into the Illinois-USC recap. So Illinois wins on homecoming, 34-32, as I just alluded to. David Alano game-winning field goal to get the job done there in Champaign. Illinois now 4-1. Huge, huge bounce back win. Can't say enough good things. I think the offense, for the most part, was fluid. Luke Altmaier still mistake-free. Illinois' defense was able to force a turnover early in the game. That was gigantic. I think ball security is something that Illinois will have to work on. Caden Fagan, more specifically, and Khalil Valentine for that matter, but more specifically, Caden Fagan. I thought Illinois' 2-minute drill was executed really well at the end of the game. I think they were extremely, extremely confident in themselves going in, that they knew that they could win the game if they had enough time left to go down the field and score, and they did just that. USC, though, I got to give Makai Lemon a lot of credit. I think he's one of the most exciting receivers in college football. If they didn't leave Illinois too much time on the clock at the end of the game, USC probably wins that game going away, but nevertheless, Illinois gets the job done. Huge, huge win to begin the Big Ten home slate, if you will. First win in the Big Ten in the newly renamed Geese Memorial Stadium, so that's always exciting. And REO Speedwagon was an unbelievably entertaining halftime performance. So it was great to be there. Champaign, you guys treated me great. Shout out to everyone who came up to me to say hi. The volleyball match against Oregon the night before was great. The parade was awesome. The whole weekend was great. Big Noon Kickoff was cool. Shout out to Brady Quinn and Rob Stone for talking to the media beforehand. Appreciate you guys too. And of course, got to see Brett win another game. And we keep our undefeated fist bump streak alive whenever I go down there and he wins. So shout out to Coach for making sure that I was covered at the end of that game. And it was very cool to see Bielema embrace with his dad and other members of his family during that press conference. It was very, very cool. So just figured I would mention that. All right, now we're going to get into the second half of the show. But before we do, just wanted to give a quick word from our sponsors. So we will be right back after messages from our friends over at Playback as well as Novig. And then we'll go in and we will get to the second half of the show and get to some more goodies. We have some fun topics coming up in the second leg here, so you won't want to miss those. So we will be right back.
Hey fans, Novig is here to change the way you play. Available in 35 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and New York, Novig is America's #1 sports prediction market, and it's 10 times more profitable than traditional sports books because there's no house edge. Instead, you're betting directly against other sports fans just like yourself. Novig is also the only free exchange, which means you keep every dollar you win, whether you're putting plays down on the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, Major League Baseball, college sports, or even UFC and tennis. Novig gives you the power to pick the best odds, or better yet, set your own. Sign up today with the code ETB Network, and you'll get 1,000 Novig coins plus $5 in Novig cash, and special bonus offers like spending $5 and getting $50 back. Novig, where fans play smarter. You must be 21 years or older to play. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Just wanted to give a quick timeout in the middle of the show to remind you guys that Bando's Breakdown is presented by Playback. I teased it a little bit earlier that there was an announcement coming, and sure enough, without further ado, here we go. Presented by Playback, watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. And with that, we can get back to the show. Thank you again to our friends over at Playback. Again, Bando's Breakdowns and every single show across ETB is presented by Playback. Shout out to them for all they do. All right, let's move on now and get into the second half of the show. Let's talk some odds here. Bando's Breakdowns odds, of course, are presented by Novig. Let's get into the Novig pick of the week that I like to call it. Illinois goes to Purdue, number 23 in the country, taking on a Purdue team with a new coach in Barry Odom, fresh off of bye. Illinois, a 9.5-point favorite at the time this is being recorded, over under 56.5. Can Illinois can Illinois keep the cannon for back-to-back years for the first time in a long time? It's been almost 20 plus years or so, something like 01-02, something like that was the last time Illinois kept the cannon 2 years in a row. Hopefully it can start a new streak. But Illinois, a comfortable favorite here. I actually really like this number, and I'm going to tell you why. Purdue has 50 plus new players. It still has Ryan Brown, but a few flaws. Their pass defense is one of the worst in the country. Gave up 56 to Notre Dame a couple weeks ago. Lost to USC by a couple of scores and gave up 33 in that game. Struggled in the first half against Southern Illinois. So this team has some early flaws to where they don't really have an identity yet. And, you could spin it the other way and say, oh, Zain, it could be, the game where Purdue establishes its identity. I'm not so sure. I think Illinois is back on a collision course. It knows that it needs to go into this road trip, handle business, win by multiple scores, and get ready for Ohio State. It's as simple as that. They can't let up. There's no room for error in this spot. It's simple. Illinois can't lose this game. Can't lose this game. If you lose this game, all the momentum for Ohio State's dead. All the momentum for Ohio State's dead. Yeah, it's a noon Eastern kickoff, but probably big noon kickoff. Maybe regrets potentially coming there. It hasn't been officially announced that they are, but if we're going to assume that they're going to be there, it takes the luster off that. And now you're in a scenario to where the committee is going to look at these two losses potentially if Illinois were to falter against Purdue and say, yeah, this doesn't look like a playoff team. The narrative would immediately switch right back to that Illinois is not a college football playoff caliber team. Hence why I think the voters have them at 23. I think it's very simple. The voters have it's simple. The voters have Illinois, or excuse me, my bad. The voters actually have Illinois at 22. Let me just briefly fix that. My point still stands though in saying that that they are, they are ranked below Notre Dame, and I think there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is simply because Notre Dame's two losses are to better teams than Illinois' one loss to Indiana. And it's clear that maybe Indiana had a bit of a hangover from this past week. So my point in saying all this is simple. Tread lightly with this pick, but I do like Illinois to cover the number simply because they're the better team at every single position. It's as simple as that. I trust Luke Altmaier more than I trust Brown. And it's as simple as that. Regardless of where the game is, the game could be in Champaign, and I would still pick Illinois to win the game. It's as simple as that. So give me Illinois minus the 9.5. Not going to touch the over-under. As long as Illinois wins and covers this game, I'm completely fine with that. Give me the Illini to get to 5-1 before the biggest game in a really long time, potentially number one Ohio State coming to Champaign a week from Saturday. Yours truly will be there. I can already not wait for it, but Illinois needs to get through this Purdue game before we can really get excited about how big this Ohio State game could really be, especially if Ohio State is still number one in the nation. All right, let's move on now to some UFC. Dana White was on 60 Minutes this past Sunday night, and we're going to get a chance to hear one of the crazy things that he had to say just about his sport and kind of the notion around it in regards to masculinity. So again, this is courtesy of 60 Minutes. Here we go.
I don't think there's this cultural movement. It's a lot of guys. We call it the manosphere. You're one of the leaders.
You talk about knowing your fan base and knowing who they are.
Who are they?
18 to 34-year-old males and growing. We're global. We are definitely unapologetically masculine.
Can this bubble over to too much? When you hear toxic masculinity.
What's that mean?
You tell me.
No, you just said it. What's the definition of toxic? How can somebody be too masculine?
Man, that's a good question, and I'm not sure. What I can tell you is this interview was very riveting, I guess you could say. It was a unique interview. It was an interview where Dana wasn't really out of his shell in this piece. Excuse me, it's not the 60 Minutes that I thought. I thought it was going to be half controversial, half positive, and most of it was positive. Most of it was, fledgling brand, gets huge. They're now on Paramount, $7.7 billion next year. The issue that I have is there are so many other things around the sport that they just didn't talk about. It's simple as that. They didn't talk about, oh, are the cards oversaturated, or he did. John Wertheim did address fighter pay, but he did it in a very general way. But fighter pay, I think, is still a massive issue in that space. And also just talking about other stuff, like just, they don't really honor legends in the way that they used to. The pay-per-views are a little bit watered down. You could argue the same for this weekend. We'll get into UFC 320 in just a second. But overall, though, it was just one of those interviews where, like, yeah, I've heard all this before. It's as simple as that. I learned not a single new thing in this entire interview. And maybe it's because I follow the sport as closely as I do. Maybe it's because I follow most of the interviews he does. But from a casual observer, most of the things they reported on are very Googleable. Googleable. I don't know how to say it. But nevertheless, nothing was new. And I thought the goal of 60 Minutes was to give new, unbiased, factual reporting. And I'm not saying they didn't cover facts, because they did. But they didn't do it in a way where I thought 60 Minutes would press him about things that, are different and interesting and stuff like that. So I thought it was just okay. I'd give it like a B minus. Not the greatest effort from 60 Minutes. Felt like a huge promo piece on the UFC himself and what they're going to do come January 2026 with this CBS partnership. That could be me being negative, but just overall, not the biggest fan of what they were able to turn out in regards to all that stuff. So that's kind of how I feel about it. And, I hope it goes well from that standpoint, but I think, this is something that CBS is going to have to figure out, is how hard are they going to press him on these certain issues. And I thought they were going to do this in this interview, but apparently they didn't. And I don't know if they will during this partnership or not. But it was fascinating to me that he was not only on 60 Minutes, but he got so much positive publicity. It was very, very unique, very, very unique in a sense there as well. So just figured I would mention that. Let's move on now to another UFC topic, or a couple more topics before we get out of here. UFC 320. All right, so we have Alex Pereira rematching Magomed Ankalaev for the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship. Magomed Ankalaev got the job done in March at UFC 313 in Las Vegas to win the belt. Alex Pereira's had time to think about it. He's had time to watch the film. He's had time to tape study a lot. Can Alex Pereira reclaim his title? And the answer that I have for you all is I think he can. I think 100% Alex Pereira is a dangerous Alex Pereira. Magomed Ankalaev has not been hit in the way that Alex Pereira can hit him and will hit him if he wants to win this fight. And I just simply think that Alex Pereira is a man possessed. He knows that he really hurt the UFC in a big way in multiple aspects. Too many to get into on this program right now. But it's one of those situations where I believe that if Pereira wins, he'll be back in the good graces of a lot of people. And he'll go back to being one of the most marketable UFC stars to date. Because if he loses, just like Sean O'Malley lost twice to Merab Dvalishvili, this past one being in June, you don't really hear a whole lot from O'Malley anymore. If Pereira virally knocks him out and it's in the first round and it's vicious and it's a phenomenal fight, there's a good chance that he'll be talked about as a major star going into 2026. And the likelihood of him competing at the White House or on any of these other major cards that haven't been announced yet for next year, which none of them I know about at present, would be a big deal, especially if he's the light heavyweight champion again. Or if the fight's close and Pereira wins, you could do the trilogy and it's no big deal, because right now everything's figured out at heavyweight. There's a rumor that he might move up to heavyweight at some point. And now, with Tom Aspinall fighting Cyril Gane in a couple of weeks, and with John Jones still lurking, it seems that the heavyweight division is kind of content for a little bit, to where maybe they don't need Pereira to move up. So that's another element to this whole thing that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. So I really like Pereira to win this fight. I'm taking him in round 2. I think it's going to be a round 2 TKO. I think round 1 is another feeling out type process, but then Pereira just goes for it in round 2, catches on Kawhi with something, gets him up against the fence and starts wailing on him, and the referee will stop the fight from there. So give me an and new for the main event of the evening. And then in the co-main event of the evening, Merab Dvalishvili, Corey Sandhagen. This is a matter of, can Corey Sandhagen survive Merab Dvalishvili's early storm? Is this guy's pace is at a level that I don't think we've seen at bantamweight in a really long time. Probably since Uriah Faber was ruling the WEC. That's how much Merab's pace reminds me a lot of the old school days of Uriah Faber. I think Merab is an awesome fighter. I think he's a great wrestler. And I think he's someone to where the more pressure that he puts on somebody, the more dangerous he is. Sandhagen likes to, step back, uses kickboxing, eventually, uses wrestling to set stuff up. He'll need to have a counter for anything that Dvalishvili throws at him. Because if he doesn't, it's going to be a long night. I like Dvalishvili by decision here to defend his UFC bantamweight title and show that he's the best bantamweight in the world. It's as simple as that. And, there's been a lot of talk if Corey Sandhagen wins, would a Sean O'Malley fight be of interest to him? And he says, yeah, but he even admitted it. Sean O'Malley needs 1 or 2 wins before we're talking a title fight again after he got schooled in the rematch against Merab. So I think there's a lot riding on that fight, and I think Sean O'Malley will be watching intently. All right, UFC Perth. We're just going to go over the main event. Carlos Alberg knocks out Dominic Reyes to establish himself as a top contender in the light heavyweight division. I don't think there's any doubt about it. I think this guy's dangerous. He's nasty. He's got great strikes, and just overall, he's super competent. He's going to be flown out to UFC 320 this weekend to watch the main event of the evening, which I think is going to be a great fight. And who knows, he might go into the octagon for whoever wins if my rematch idea doesn't come to fruition between Ankalaev and Pereira. But nonetheless, though, a great knockout by Alberg. Keeps his winning streak alive at nine in a row now. A very, very dominant presence at 205. And I think someone who is going to be really dangerous moving forward as someone who's a contender or a future champion in the coming years. So watch out for Carlos Alberg to do some big things. I'm very, very excited to see how the remainder of his career plays out. All right, let's talk some NFL really quick. Bears and the Raiders, blocked field goal win for the Bears. They get the job done on the road in Las Vegas. Great win for the Bears. It's a win that the Bears needed. Huge, huge win. 2-2 now going into the bye week. A lot to fix. That's a game that should have not been that close. The Bears failed to finish several drives, but they were able to get the game won at the very end there. Las Vegas, again, just like I said a week ago, not a whole lot that people really know about them, but what we do know is Las Vegas, so far this season, minus the game against New England, failed to close out games. And that was a winnable game for Vegas at home, but they were unable to do so. I was really happy with how the Bears looked. And I just think overall it was a great win for the Bears on the road and just a fun environment in Vegas. A lot of Bears fans were there. Sold out house it looked like. And definitely an atmosphere to remember. Huge win for the Bears to get to 2-2. All right, rounding out the show, one thing that I saw, Twitter going insane over James Franklin losing that game to Oregon this past week. People want James Franklin fired. And let me tell you this. Right now, mid-season, horrible idea. Horrible idea. It will not happen mid-season. If you want him fired next year or the year after, I get it. But guys, come on. Come on. This guy literally took Penn State from the ashes of nothingness after the Jerry Sandusky, Joe Paterno thing. Turned Penn State into a perennial winner, won a Big Ten championship in 2016. I understand he's not a very good big game coach. And in the big games, he doesn't usually win them. But to win 10, 11 games a year and to go to the college football playoff, tons of programs would kill to have that happen every year. So I understand Penn State fans have high expectations, but they're delusional. They haven't won a national title since the 80s. Some like to say the 1994 team should have been a national champion, whatever. History tells me that they really have not been relevant from a postseason standpoint in a long time. You have to enjoy James Franklin while you can because he's going to be very difficult to replace. I think, to me, the coaching market is really thin unless you ask Urban Meyer to come out of retirement, which I don't think is going to happen, or Nick Saban. But even then, though, James Franklin, I think, is the guy to lead the program. He's been doing it a long time. As I alluded to, he turned it around. There's still tons of the season left. It can still make the college football playoff, and maybe, just maybe, it'll rewrite the wrongs and go to the national title game. You never know. But I think saying right now after this loss that he should be fired is absolutely preposterous. So I couldn't stand that. And then finally, Zain Zinger. For this week at least. That's what I have. So the MLB playoffs are already underway, and I think they should only be played at night. I was lucky enough to go to the Cubs-Padres game 1 on Tuesday. That was during the day. A lot of people have work. A lot of people have school. A lot of people have other obligations. A lot of people I know couldn't go to this game because of those reasons I just said. Playoff games are meant to be played at night on the weekends, but not during the week in the middle of the day. It doesn't make sense. I don't care if it doesn't hurt TV ratings. You want people to be in the building for the postseason. It's simple as that. You would say the same thing for the NFL. You would say the same thing for the NBA. You say the same thing for hockey. You can say the same thing for the UFC. The UFC is a Saturday night product. College football, mainly Saturday during the day, Saturday night product. MLB playoff games, if they're going to be played during the week, they should be played at night. It's simple as that. Doesn't seem like that hard of an ask, and more people would show up. I would get less people in my DMs, or fewer people rather, telling me that they can't go to the game. I get way fewer people. There'd be more people interested in going to the game if they were at night, especially if it's the playoffs, and they're very difficult tickets to get. But I'll give Wrigley Field this. It was sold out Tuesday. Great atmosphere. Cubs won the game 3-1. By the time this comes out, hopefully the Cubs are in the division series. But nonetheless, though, MLB playoffs should be at night. It's pretty simple. And I don't think it's a hard ask for the league to fix that. All right, that's going to do it, though, for another edition of Bando's Breakdowns. No errors from me this week, which is great. Always like when the show is clean and concise. But nonetheless, though, fun time. Just as a few quick reminders before we get out of here, please be sure to listen to Bando's Breakdowns wherever you get your podcasts. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Acast, and so much more. I keep forgetting to mention this, but if you are on the audio-only side, you are getting this podcast a few hours early. So if you want to check it out, comes out every week 3 hours before the video premiere. So, of course, that would be noon Eastern on the audio-only side. And, of course, to watch me, go to youtube.com/TV Network. Please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. Would be very much appreciated if you guys did so. And hit the notification bell. That way you don't miss a single moment of any of my shows or any of the other short-form content posted across the network. But nonetheless, though, that's going to do it. Episode 62 with myself, Zain Bando. Great show as always. We'll be back next week to recap UFC 320, preview the return of Charles Oliveira, everything going on in the NFL and college football, and so much more. But until then, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll catch you guys soon. Have a good one, and thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of BB. I greatly appreciate you guys. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you next week. Cheers.